thanks for tuning into Finding Indie Authors, brought to you by Multiverse 2020 Geek Fantasy Track. I am your host, DL Wainright, he, him, they, them. And so super fast, I gotta just kind of cover what this is. It's basically, so how do you find new indie authors? Do we know how and where to find the independent creators who are creating amazing stories that just don't get enough publicity? And so let's talk about indie creators with some indie creators, and we'll also just try to help you find your next favorite story. And so we're going to start off by doing some quick introductions with each of our panelists, and we'll go in order of this random list I have here. So we will start with Jarrod.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jarrod D. King. I'm the author of 2 fantasy novels, Pangea, Unsettled Land, and The Octorati. I also do podcasts and YouTube stuff, some crazy creative, and I'm really interested in having this chat tonight.
Oh, great. And so then we'll go with Bobby.
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I'm a writer of all kinds of stuff. I write novels, comic books. I've dabbled a little with screenplays and some audio plays. And you know, most of my work falls in the indie landscape. I have done a few things with some larger publishers, but I do work with some indie publishers, and I have a little small press that I run myself as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And next we have Sara.
Hi, I'm Sara Bond. My debut novel came out in February. Gravity's Air. It's a space opera, but I write science fiction, fantasy. Have a couple of short stories coming out soon, and I run a fun book review site on my website, and I pair books I read with cocktails. Some signature, some classic, and I explain exactly why I do that.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. And so for more about our panelists, please check the linked videos from them in the description or on multiversecon.org, where you can also find links to all of their programming. And speaking of multiversecon.org, if you are watching this as part of the convention weekend stream, join us on the Discord channel for this track for a watch party of this panel with some of the panelists. All right, and so instructions on how you can get into our Discord can be found at multiversecon.org/Discord. Okay, all right, and so we're gonna move into some questions here I have, if I can pull them up. And so for some people, there's still kind of a stigma to indie or self-published works. And so I'm curious to see what each of you have to say about that, as in, what are some reasons that you or others that you know may have chosen specifically to go this route? And what do you think the indie and self-published landscape is really like now? Basically, just, you know, give folks motivation as to why they'd want to seek out indie authors specifically. Okay, who wants to go first? Let me pull up so I can actually see everybody at once. Or you could just start talking if you want.
Well, okay, I guess I can jump. I'll jump in. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. When I first started, I started back in the early '90s. My first published work was in 1992, and at that point in time, self-publishing was very much looked down on. It was not considered a viable option. So the first several years of my writing career was spent trying to find agents, trying to find publishers. It's not always a pleasant experience. It's a very demoralizing experience. You get told no a lot. You know, we can't sell you. That's what I hear. You would hear a lot. It's like, yeah, we just can't sell you. So I started working for smaller press publishers as an alternative. And once I was doing that, I started getting to just having projects of my own that I wanted to work on that I really didn't have a place to put them. So instead of going through that, trying to find an agent, trying to find a bigger publisher again, I just decided I would try to do a couple of them myself and see how it worked. And I enjoyed the process. And for the most part, I'm not a big fan of the promotion or the production side of it. I don't enjoy that as much, but it's got to be done. But so I started doing that, and I found a little bit of success doing my own books allowed me to do. I can do one type of stories for other publishers, but then this, stuff that no publisher is really hiring small press to look for, I can do those myself. So that allows me through my own publishing company to do crime fiction and mysteries and thrillers, which the small presses that I work with aren't really looking for that much. So it gives me some flexibility.
Yeah, I went through a similar process with searching for an agent and a publisher. I mean, I probably queried for 2 years, went through multiple revise and resubmits with my novel, kept being told, well, we really like it, we really are impressed with it. I think there's an audience for it, but nobody's buying space opera right now, which I'm like, that's not true. Space opera is selling like crazy right now, and I happen to know several indie authors that are doing that. And so I gave up on the agent search and went with a small publisher. I go with a small publisher out of Texas called Black Rose Writing, and they offer a lot of the production side that I couldn't do myself, which was very helpful. I have no idea how to format for Kindle. Cover art is a mystery to me, and they provided a lot of that, but a lot of the marketing and stuff, they push the authors to do themselves. So that means reaching out to a lot of indie authors, and I've discovered so many incredible members of this community that are really finding their niche in the audience. A lot of fantasy romance and science fiction romance that everyone says do not sell, and they're going, I'm selling thousands a day through ebooks. I've got an audience, but nobody wants to pay me, so I'm paying myself, and they're making some good money out of it. So the move towards hybrid publishing is really enticing.
Yeah, I published my first book in 2016, and that was self-published. I can remember going into it thinking, if I were able to go the traditional route, I'd be able to editing or with book covers and marketing. I learned that you can kind of handle all of those things on your own, and in fact with marketing, even if you go the traditional route, a lot of times they want you to have your own platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured, why not leave the gatekeeper road, not to look down on anybody who goes the traditional route, because I think that's definitely a viable option for some. But I like to take my fate into my own hands, and so that's why I decided to go the indie route. And I think another thing was thinking what the market was looking for and whether they were looking for Black gay fantasy. And I think you could be Black, or you could be gay, but but having those intersections, it gets a little bit harder to actually have an agent jump on. At least that's been my experience. So that's kind of the reasons why I went into it, and I enjoy actually getting my stories out there and people reading them.
Yeah, there's like Jerry just mentioned too, that taking it into your own hands. When you work with traditional publishing, you automatically are in their timetable, and their timetables are nothing like our timetables. I finished this book; it's ready to go to press. I'm ready to send it to press. With traditional, a lot of times, that's 2 years away. It's in a queue somewhere. And I think with indie publishing, we have the ability to reach our audience not only faster, but we're not doing our promotion to bookstores. We are promoting directly to readers. And I think that's where a lot of indie authors and indie presses are thriving, because, like Sara said, she's told, oh, this isn't selling, but we know people that are selling it. And so there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between the big publishers, the bookstores, and the audience. And so as an indie, we're just going right to the audience. It's like, who likes this stuff? And they're out there.
All right, excellent. So basically, I feel like what I'm getting from everyone is that they feel like they get more creative freedom by going this route, and that also you're able to then focus on the kind of story you want to tell instead of having to get caught up in the traditional publishers. This is what's the current trend and stuff. And so that also continues to give you more freedom to really explore the actual story that you want instead of having to change something around to appease the market and stuff. So I can see why that would also be a very appealing thing for readers if they're looking for fresh new stuff instead of just whatever it is that the big publishers have deemed to be popular and the popular trend now. So would you agree? Yes, no?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're still playing to a market, but
Sure.
you're able to reach. Whereas large publishers and agents and even book buyers, not even the bookstores. The bookstores are working with the readers immediately. It's the book buyers. They're interested in picking the next, I don't know, the Divergent series or the next, who's the next Rick Riordan. I mean, they are looking for who is going to make us bank for the next year or so. So they're trying to find as big an audience as possible. Indie authors, small publishers, they're able to capture much smaller audiences and they're able to find their niche readers, people that are looking for very specific stuff, very off the beaten path. And sometimes stuff that's off trend, like there's still a huge vampire market, but the publishers won't touch it because it's been tapped out from Twilight.
Right.
It's not tapped out.
No, people still love vampires. So yeah, that's a good point. So, all right, excellent. So let's move on to who are one or two of your favorite indie authors and how did you go about finding them?
I can give an example. One of my favorite indie authors is J Benton. We actually met online and I had done a small series of interviews with indie authors, and he was one of them, and we kind of built a friendship. His writing is impeccable. He does a range from like romance to thrillers, so he has a whole range, and I think he's in the midst of writing a fantasy as well. And from when I beta read his book, it was amazing. So I would definitely give him a look. I'm
a huge fan of Kit Roca. It's a pair of authors, and I can't remember their individual names right now, but I can probably look it up. They wrote the Beyond series, Beyond Shame, Beyond Control. It's this amazing series of dystopian sci-fi erotica. And there's so much in it. I don't know if I'm allowed to say on a PG channel, but it gets pretty racy. And they self-published and have, I think there's probably 12 books in the series, but they're amazing.
Just a few top of my head. I'm big fans of Milt Davis, who writes a lot of steampunk novels, a lot of stuff with an African heritage to it, kind of pulpy stories. I met Milt in the convention circuit, and we've become friends over the years. And I'd also liked Van Allen Plexico, who is also a pulp writer, who was doing pulp and science fiction novels. Decided a couple years ago he was going to try his hand at a 1960s heist novel. And he wrote his first one called Vegas Heist, which was so good that he just released this year a sequel to it called Miami Heist, which was also quite good. And and I could name out probably a dozen more off the top of my head, but I'll just stick with those two. But they're guys I've met from either being in the, as an indie author, you meet others, on social media or at conventions. or you've worked on anthologies together or stuff like that. And so I've met a lot of creative people that way that it's been really fun to follow their progression and see what they do. And sometimes that leads to cool things of us later. We've known each other, oh, let's do something together, or, it's cool things like that happen.
So Kit Roca, Bree Bridges, and Donna Herron. And the way I discovered them was actually through Twitter. Bree said something really clever on a thread with other authors, and then mentioned, oh, by the way, I write multiple paramour erotic romance, LGBTQ all the way over. And I'm like, okay, I'm signed up. But I just met them through Twitter, and I followed and found their amazing series, and they're really good about recommending other indie authors.
Well, perfect. That will transition us into our next question of what are good online sources to help people be able to find indie authors? What sites or platforms would you recommend as being some of the best ways that people can seek out new indie authors?
Well, certainly, I mean, social media is always good. I used to do it every day, but it's a little harder some days than others. But I try to at least 2 or 3 times a week share with my audience other writers whose work I like, whether it's they've got something new out or I've just read something. I try to share that, going, hey, you guys should check this out. And so doing that over various social media outlets is a good step. I also think leaving reviews of books you've read is an excellent way of getting eyes on those books.
I do a lot of Goodreads lists. I look through like best indie authors, best sci-fi indie, best fantasy indie. And if you find 1 or 2 of those that you like, once you buy them, go in, if you don't necessarily buy them through Amazon, but once you have, you can look for books that other people have bought after buying those books. And that's a great way to find similar tastes and connect with authors that you might not have seen reviewed on big sites or recommended by other people.
I would add that Smashwords is a good way to kind of see, because we have a lot of indie authors that are publishing through Smashwords, and as soon as you hit the page, there's a bunch of books listed right there. But I would also say, if you find one that you like, maybe follow them on Twitter and hit, see who they're following, and just see who else is there, because a lot of writers follow each other on Twitter. It's a whole community. So once you find one, you'll probably be able to find 10 immediately.
Well, and that's a great segue into, there's a great community on the Reddit fantasy threads. People go through and they promote their own books, and then other people will jump on and say, oh, I wrote something very similar. Here's the link to buy it. And they'll do every once in a while an Ask Me Anything with other authors, so you can learn whether or not you are actually interested in what they have to say.
There's a lot of book giveaways too, where people are giving away ebooks. If you've got stuff that you don't mind for like a week giving away some ebooks, you can get on there. And like, there's one going on right now. It's a giant genre sale or something. There's like 25 books on there. I don't think it's quite 25 authors. I think some of them have more than one. But I put one of my novellas in there as a giveaway for the amount of this. So if we do that and we all say there's 20 of us, and all 20 of us promote the sale, hopefully our people will follow over who already know our work but can check out the other people. And so a lot of times us working together, just doing little things like that, helps. And word of mouth too. It's like, hey, if you like this, you might like this. And yeah, those are always good word of mouth recommendations.
You can do those bundles too with some traditional authors and tap into their audience. Say, hey, I know we've worked on, we had a short story together in an anthology. Would you be interested in doing a giveaway, and then getting like 5 or 6 other authors together? That's a great way to discover authors that other authors respect.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I just want to jump in here and also like tag on to everybody, because I all brilliant suggestions. And I just want to say for the viewers out there, also, if you do start following authors on like Facebook or Twitter, sometimes they will also do release parties where they will have other indie authors join in with that, where there'll be giveaways and stuff where you can be able to win some of those other indie authors' books if you want to, during little like challenges or fun games and stuff like that. And so that could be an interesting way that you can find other authors too.
Especially in
Yeah.
recent months, everyone's
Yeah.
doing little online giveaways. Hey, we're all on Twitter for this amount of time. Ask us questions and maybe win a prize or two.
And almost every author, if you sign up for their newsletter, you'll get a free book.
At least a short story.
Yeah.
All right. And so now here's a trickier question. What are some good ways to find new indie authors offline?
Independent bookstores. Not Barnes and Noble, not Books A Million. Go to local independent bookstores, and a lot of times they're selling consignment books. For people who aren't traditionally published, they're usually print by demand, so they only have a few books on hand, but those are usually local authors, so you might even be able to go to events with these authors, learn more about them, have access to them that way. But local independent bookstores are absolutely where you need to go.
Yeah, I would also add like conventions or local conferences. Sometimes local, like we here. I'm in the Atlanta area. We get a lot of these where there's local indie author day at the libraries, which is about the only, because a lot of times libraries aren't buying and stocking our books, but they have these events throughout the year where you can go and they'll give, everybody's lined up and you can just go and meet local authors that way. A lot of different events, and some of these towns that have like a fall festival, they'll invite 3 or 4 authors to come in and meet the local creators. Those are good ways as well.
I guess the only other thing, because I think that pretty much sums it up. The only other thing is, if you're a writer, if you're interested in writing, maybe join a writers group, or join maybe a book club or something. If they happen to be reading an author's book or something, that might, I don't know, you might not, I don't know, that might not be the best one, but I don't know, it's worth a shot, I guess. But the other ones I would say first.
I'll say one of my local bookstores here, I'm in North Atlanta, and they have a science fiction book club, and they do try to get independent local authors and buy 30, 40 of their books, and then invite them to come and talk. And it's a great way to network and find new authors.
Absolutely. We have you've probably seen this as well, Sarah, around here. We've had a lot of either bars or restaurants having author nights, books and beers, or barbecue and beers. And you go in and you can talk, answer questions, do a little reading, sell a few books. It's a great way for people to come out in a non-convention setting or a non-bookstore setting. So it's a little more relaxed, and I've found those to be quite fun.
All right, excellent. And so now I want to pitch this question to each of you. What method have you found or feel has reached the most people that you tried of all these things we just discussed, offline and online? What do you think has been the most effective for you personally to reach new viewers or new readers?
I would say doing a convention like this has easily gotten me in front of more eyes. I think people like, if you have a table out, people like to walk by and like to ask you about the book. If you have something to offer for free, like a free short story or something, then that's even better. I feel that that's probably my most effective way. I think with online, you have to know how to manipulate the social media thing, and not everybody has that. I know I don't. Trying to get there, but yeah.
I absolutely agree. Offline conventions and book signings and things like that are the best way. because not only are people coming up and looking at it, they're also getting a chance to know us, and they're talking to us, or they've heard us do a panel or whatever. And so they come up and talk to us. And sometimes that personal connection, I talk to you and, oh, you're very nice. I probably am going to enjoy your book. So they're not only just buying the book, like if you go online, all you've got is the book. In this, you have that personal connection of, oh, I heard this person talk, or this person did a great panel or whatever. And so you have that extra connection to the book, which will hopefully then bring you back for more books after that. As far as online, that one's a little tougher to say because, you do so much in so many different places online. I will say, in lieu of doing in-person conventions this year, events like we're doing here, where we're in, people can watch us and hear the panel and talk. I found those have been good for interacting with people. People will comment on, oh, I enjoyed this panel or whatever. I can't say with 100% certainty it leads to sales, but it does lead to people at least talking to you and checking other stuff out. So yeah, try to do as much stuff online, and like I said, too many different places, but yeah.
My best sales have definitely come from 2 or 3 online promotions. One didn't cost me almost anything. It was a giveaway, and I gave away like 3 or 4 copies that I had, and they were full paperback, mail them in, and I got a lot of followers, and then had a bump in my sales from that. And one was very expensive book club promotion. I dropped it down for a 1-day 99-cent sale. I was just trying to get higher reviews and just get my book into the hands of people. And I had 1,000 sales in a single day, which was awesome. Hit Amazon #1 bestseller for like 3 or 4 hours, which was amazing in space opera and science fiction. I was #2 overall for science fiction for a couple of hours, which was incredible. I have all the screenshots, but it changes so quickly. So it's literally 3 or 4 hours, but
that's okay. That was 3 or 4 of the most awesome hours, right?
It was brilliant. I felt really good about myself. I popped a bottle of champagne, and then I had a lot of sales, and I've gotten a whole bunch of reviews from people that I never would have reached otherwise, and that felt good.
Another weird thing that helped push sales, and it wasn't anything I physically did, but I won an award for something, and suddenly that book sales went up because there must be something to it if somebody gave them an award for something.
That's a great way of finding indie authors too. I mean, checking out some of the awards that are open to non-traditionally published books or small published books, or even hybrid authors who have published one traditional book and have others that are independent. That's a great way to find new authors.
I also see a lot of authors that do interviews with other authors for their website or their blog, which, not only is it promoting other creators, they're technically promoting themselves too, because you're coming to their site to read the reviews. So stuff like that's really cool. Where, because you would assume the person doing the interview and the interviewee are going to promote it and get people to the site. So it helps everybody. And I think stuff like that is wonderful. I have friends that do like video online, like where they talk to different people through the chat, and they interview other creators and whatever, just to get that word out. And I think that helps, because you're hopefully introducing someone to a different audience who may never have heard of them before.
Well, there are also book bloggers where people that they're reviewers and they've got entire blogs on that, and they will also have interviews with authors. So that is also, if you find good book blogger sites to follow, then you can usually see not just like reviews for new books, but sometimes also interviews with usually indie authors and stuff as well.
In doing research for this, I discovered one, beforewegoblog.com. They have an indie spotlight. So not only do they allow indie authors to reach their huge audience, they do a roundup fairly regularly of the best indie books that they've read, best indie books that have been recommended to them. So they're probably a good resource to reach out to as well.
Yeah, and never underestimate the local angle. Send your press releases to your local newspaper, radio station, and TV station. Especially like magazines and newspapers always have filler, like, oh crap, we have this much space to fill. And they love talking about local people doing stuff. So you could reach another audience that way.
And Jarrod, so what about you? What has been the most effective means for you to reach new readers?
Yeah, most effective. Yeah, I mean, of course, it would like the conventions, like I said, but you know, I know that there were, you know, if you think about your niche, you have to kind of go where they are. And so I've gone on trips where they had a specific panel for authors and I guess other people doing like music or some other entertainment type stuff, but they had a moment there for authors as well. So that has helped. I mean, it's been mostly that offline outreach. I would say readings, doing some readings, that has helped as well. And I think really just have to maintain a relationship with the people that are really interested in your books, because you don't want it to just be a one-off thing. You want to have a continued relationship with your readers and you want them to keep coming back. So I find that to be really important.
Excellent. All right. And so that kind of also transitions into the sort of next question, which is, so once someone finds an indie author that they really like, what are some ways that that reader can support the author beyond just the purchase of the book?
Okay, I can jump into this one. So, and I think we had already mentioned this at one point. So you want to give the authors reviews. That's a big. And then, of course, you want to share their work. But also, you know, if you're a reader and you want to give the author an extra push, you know, reach out to them, write them an email. A lot of indie authors are not so huge that they'll never see your email. So, I mean, you know, reach out to them, say, hey, you know, I love this, and, you know, give them some kudos. And I think it'll always, you know, you put good energy out there, it always comes back. So
Yeah, the reviews are huge. And it doesn't have to be like a multiple paragraph thing, just like, I love the prose, I love the action, this character was amazing. 2 lines can make a huge difference in Goodreads and Amazon algorithms just getting you recommended to other authors. Just two lines and you're done.
Yes, we have reviews. I will second both of them. You're absolutely reviews, but also word of mouth. Word of mouth is probably the best marketing that we have. If a fan, someone has read our book and likes it and tells people, you know, whether on social media, whether in person, or go to your local bookstore, your local, you know, small independent bookstore and say, hey, do you guys have any of Sarah Bond's books? If not, you'd love her, you should, you know, try that. You know, you never know. They may go, you know, we'll look her up, you know. So there's different things like that you can do just to tell people that these things exist.
Oh yeah. Someone requested my book from Elliott Bay Book Company in Seattle, and I'm like, they didn't carry it, but they got it in special. And just seeing my book in there, I was like, oh, my favorite bookstore in the world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you know, and what Jarrod said too about reaching out, that's because you never know, you know, because this is a very lonely job we all do. You know, you're in the room, you're by yourself. And there are days when you're like, man, why do I keep putting myself through this? And then that email comes in from somebody that says, oh my God, I just read your book and this was awesome and this was great. And you just don't realize how it makes us feel. And so, yeah, anything you can do like that is wonderful.
Requesting books from your library as well. I mean, they don't have to have multiple copies. They just need one. And that gets your book in the hands of so many different people. People will just stumble across it, and it also gets registered, so that helps. And they do ebook requests too. So if it's not available through print, they do ebook library.
And audio, if you have audio.
And
books.
audio.
Yeah.
And I mean, going back to what Jarrod said about joining a book club, you could always join a book club and then suggest, hey guys, I know this really great book.
Like 12 sales right there. We'll go for it.
So that actually exhausted all of the questions I had. So let's try to think of some other cool things that we can discuss on how people, I think we covered every way that people could be able to find new indie authors, which is the premise of this panel. But are there any other things that we are missing? BookBub was brought up. So are there other like promotional sites or other things like that that readers can go to be able to like find some authors that they otherwise might not have known about?
The Indie Author Project is one that supports indie authors. I don't know the background of it. I just had it mentioned to me as something that can be used to help bring eyes to your book. So you got BookBub. I said before we go, blog.com. Indie Reader Discovery was another one too. They do reviews of indie books. And I don't know if it's just blind submission and hope they review you or they discover you on their own. And
All right.
Kirkus does do indie reviews, but they're very, very, very expensive. And there's no guarantee. I mean, they usually do a summary and then like 2 lines of, it was a good book. Readers might like it. They don't really recommend, but they do have a huge audience, and having a Kirkus review can be helpful.
Okay.
I also like, there's a site called Author Database, which allows you to, it's almost like like the IMDb for movies. You can do it and you put your books and stuff in there.
Oh, that's cool.
I like that. That's a nice little place. Yeah.
I've never even heard of that. Author Database?
Author Database, yeah. I think it's authordb.com, I think.
Oh, cool. All right. And then I'm trying to think of, because I know that there's sort of like different guilds, like there's like a horror writers guild and stuff like that. So those might, if they've got a way to be able to see the authors that are parts of those guilds, maybe that would be another way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll have like a list of authors, but yeah.
Yeah.
And now I will say, if you don't mind the trudge to get through it, there are Facebook groups that are like indie author promotions where people will go and post their books. It's a lot to get through, but if you're just interested in going just seeing what's there, those could be options as well.
All right, and then we got some questions here submitted. So what about things that indie authors can do that traditionally published authors may not, I guess, be able to do? And then reasons. So I guess I could think that ties back to the original question that I asked of really what's the benefit of an indie author or choosing that path. So I think we did cover that. But then also, is there a big difference between genres really with indie authors? It looks like, because we've touched on romance, but are there any really big, like, is it more challenging to find authors of different genres, or?
Well, I like what Bobby was saying about one of his author friends doing steampunk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's this very niche thing that you can write to, whereas if you try to promote steampunk at all these days, nobody wants to write about it unless you're Gail Carriger. It's like the genre is depleted, and yet there are still conventions that are dedicated specifically to steampunk. So having that ability to play into these different niche audiences that the traditional publishers are not willing to touch anymore is very helpful. That flexibility to write to a specific audience.
Yeah, and I think certainly after the ebook explosion, things like erotica they started selling a lot better because people could read them on their phones, and no one, like, it wasn't like the old days where they had to hide their book cover. You can read it on
bodice ripping.
Right, yeah. It's
cover.
so you can read different things on your mobile devices that you might have had to not read you wouldn't have read outside of your house before. So sometimes genre can work that way, where you're doing stuff just for the ebook market. But I don't know. I mean, I do multiple genres, so I haven't really noticed anything stopping me. There is a thing that I found with doing my own stuff is more a matter of size. I can write the story to the size I need it to be, not to it's got to be 100,000 words or it's got to be 60 or it's got to be, the snow series I do. They are released individually as 30,000 word novellas. So I can release 3 or 4 of them a year. You're still at the end of the year, if you get them all, you're still buying like one big thick book. But it allows me to break up the story how I want it to for that particular thing. So that's probably not something I would have been able to do at a traditional publisher who has their books have to be this size or this thick or this many words. And it allows us to play with different types of things like that.
When I know some people who write much bigger epic fantasy, nobody wants to take a chance on unproven authors with these huge books because the print costs are so high. Indie authors are able to write to the story, write it as long as they want, within reason. Nobody's to read a book that's 1,000 pages when it should be three separate books. But it does allow some flexibility, like you said, to write to the story. You don't have to push it to a certain length. You don't need to cut a vital character. I think that also speaks to the skill of the author, though, knowing what the length of the story should be. Sometimes that can be a drawback without having an editor, that you don't know for sure whether that subplot really should go away.
I find that there are some indie authors who are able to write like a book a month, and I think, and my hat's off to them. I certainly can't do that, but if you're able to find somebody that you like that is able to give you that, just keep coming out with the next thing, that's a plus. I think that a lot of traditional authors can't, that maybe a lot of indie authors can't. And if we're talking about like and the other question I think was a question about differences in genres. I think I would say the biggest difference that I notice is not necessarily between like fantasy and science fiction versus romance. I think it's probably fiction versus nonfiction, and I think the difference really comes down to marketing, because I feel like nonfiction authors, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of them have a lot more to give to their audience, as opposed to, with fiction authors, we have to be a lot more creative about how we reach out to them. What is our weekly newsletter going to be, or something like that? What are we going to say to our followers online? I just feel like it's a little bit difficult, and I don't know if that's been the experience of the other panelists, but I'm interested to hear what they think.
I have talked to some people who do nonfiction, and a lot of them can tie their books to them doing talks. So that helps them, because, I'm going to go give a talk at whatever, and I've got my book here, and it's the same topic I'm talking about. That kind of, we kind of don't have that as fiction authors as much. I mean, we can still do talks and stuff, but yeah, so that's interesting. It's yeah,
it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, I think sometimes for me, I try to focus on, I guess, I don't know, themes sometimes, but it's hard, because if they don't know the book already, don't know the story, then how can you really get that deep into it? So I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah,
an interesting dilemma.
All you have to offer is your stories. Sometimes it's like, okay, I've got a book and a couple of short stories, or I've got 7 books, but no short stories. I don't know what you can do to stay continuously engaged as a fiction indie author. Like I said, I maintain a review blog of authors and books I've read, and I make cocktails. So that's actually built me a little bit of an audience. I'm very popular at conventions, because they're like, oh, what about this cocktail? I'm not going to step behind the bar and make you something, but I can tell them the recipe, I guess.
I have found I do pretty well with, I guess it's pre-promotion. I talk about the book while I'm working on it. So that's not me actively trying to sell you anything. It's just, I wrote this today, or, oh man, I ran into this plot problem and here's how I solved it, or just talking about the project while I'm going. And then when it does come out, or even before it comes out, people are coming up and asking, how's that book going? Because they've already got vested without me having to hard sell them. And because I don't like being hard sold to, and I'm sure most people don't. So I've had to learn different ways to get interest in the book without trying to sell the book, if that makes sense.
Okay, and then that will transition to, I've got sort of a new kind of question, so we've been mostly talking to potential readers, but now let's talk to potential upcoming fellow indie authors. Do you have any advice that you could give to any aspiring indie authors of like things to avoid, or some advice for them to try as sort of like good motivation, or once they are published, what they can do? I know we talked about multiple ways already of how people can find new indie authors, but what would be the first step that you would recommend after they published, or even during the process right before they publish, that they should take to already start trying to reach out to an audience?
Find a writer's group. Find a group of like-minded people who are at the similar stage of writing as you are. If they're close to the end, they're ready to publish, they're in the querying stages, some of them might already have agents. Gather that group of friends, because several of you might go into hybrid publishing. Even if you have traditional books, you may decide, okay, the market is better for this in the indie market. But having a very good group of writer friends can allow you to diversify what you do. If you are terrible at graphic design, if you are terrible at layout, if you don't know anything about formatting, I have a friend in my group of writers who is going into hybrid publishing, and one can do all the graphic design, and one knows an editor who will help work with you on content development, on copy editor friend. Having those resources as an indie author can be very, very helpful, especially if you don't have the money to shell out for professional editing or professional cover design.
I thought of something. I'm trying to remember what it was. So okay, what was the question again? Just so I can refresh my mind.
What advice would you give for an aspiring indie author? Yes.
Got it. Okay, I got it back. So I would say if you are trying to build an audience, definitely have an email list. They talk about this. If you listen to any podcast or watch any YouTube, I mean, that's the biggest thing for indie authors, is to have an email list, or some way that you can kind of, you always have a way to reach out to your customers, and that would also, you also want to have a way to entice them to sign up, which may be a free book, a free short story, or free merchandise or something. So that would be my biggest advice.
I would say when you start, make a plan, kind of know what your goals are. Not every author has the same end goal in mind. Some people want to be New York Times bestselling authors. Some people are just happy to have a book out and they don't care whether it sells or not. You know, they can give away to their friends, and, you know, there are multiple end goals that you can have. So I always tell people, decide, and you can reach that goal, and you don't have to have just one goal, but set goals for yourself, and don't just set the end goal, set attainable goals. There was a time in my life where my ultimate goal was, man, I just wish a publisher would hire me. You know, eventually that happened. Then I have the goal after that, and the goal after that. So going with a plan, know what if indie publishing and doing it yourself, self-publishing is your goal, then read up on that. Talk to other people that have done it. That's one thing I've discovered about indie writers. If you ask them questions, 99.9% of the time they will answer you. They will tell you whatever you want to know. So if you want to do it yourself, self-publish, go talk to self-publishers, ask them questions. What's the pros and the cons? Are you happy you did it this way? Do you regret doing it this way? Things like that. Talk to people that are working with, traditional big publishers or small press. Find out what's out there. Find out what you can get from it, and then use that to, while you're still writing your book, before you start, you get to the end and decide where to go next. That gives you some insight into what your next step might be.
And don't discount small publishers either. I mean,
Yeah.
they may not have the reach of Tor or DAW, but they can get your book into places that not everyone can, and they can help take care of some of that easy stuff.
I think with your cover and.
Exactly. They may not be able to put as much money behind you, but there are some great authors that are able to come up through these small publishers and get a lot of those learning stages out of the way. I mean, you really learn a lot about the market when you have someone to take care of some of the details for you. And there are some perks. I mean, I can order my book through Target right now, which was cool. I don't think anyone has, but it's cool.
I think working with small press, because my first publishers were small press publishers, and I think too, I learned how to work with editors that were people I didn't know, because for anybody, we all probably remember our first editing experience. It hurts.
There are tears.
It's like someone stabbed you right in the heart. So I think working that way, you learn things. You certainly learn how to handle those experiences. You learn what it's like with small press, whatever their distribution is, or if they have some, or if they have none. You can get a lot of good ideas. And right, if you're not comfortable with the production side of self-publishing, working with a small press is great, because you can let them do that. You just have to know what you're giving up and what you're keeping and things like that. And so research your path, and that'll help you. That will save you a lot of heartaches. Yeah.
Talk to people who've done it.
Yeah, because those are things I wish I'd learned earlier.
All right, perfect. I want to thank my wonderful panelists here. I think all of y'all have offered a lot of really great ideas to help both readers find some new cool indie authors, and for aspiring indie authors to be able to reach some new readers. Y'all have all been wonderful. I got some housekeeping I gotta get out of the way here now. So we are collecting for charity at coffee.com. It's ko-fi.com/multiversecon. All donations, less the fees, will go to support the Equal Justice Initiative, which you can read more about at eji.org. And finally, do you want some Multiverse swag? Check out the store on our website. We have shirts, enamel pins, and more. And if you enjoyed this panel, please be sure to check out Multiverse's other programming this weekend. Our full schedule is available on multiversecon.org. And quick before we go, can each of our lovely panelists let us know what other panels we may be able to find them on?
I know I'm doing one on creating villains, and I know I have one other one, but I'm not sure what it is at the moment.
I was on the querying fantasy panel. So yeah, check that one out. We had a good conversation there as well.
And I did one exploring the legacy of Avatar: The Last Airbender on its 15th anniversary. And I think all of us are doing readings or coffee clashes or whatever the week of the con. So.
And if you want to see me on the other side, not being a moderator, but an actual panelist, I'm going to be on the writing LGBT and horror, and also writing characters that aren't like you, or writing people who aren't like you. I should have checked that title before I said that. So, hey, Thank you, everyone. You've been wonderful, and yay.
Thank you.
Ah.
Yeah.